The best camera is the one you have with you. Well, I just hope you have a better camera than the iPhone with you in that case, because as good as Apple's computational things have gotten, and with the new additions of video modes, which I've been really excited to try, and it's certainly taken me a little while to find the time to officially review them, but my iPhone is capable of recording ProRes at 4K at 30, HEVC regular video at 4K at 60, and now cinematic mode, which ended up being a tad more promising than I originally discovered. So in today's video, I'm diving into my experience with all of these 4 cameras surrounding this thing and which modes I would recommend for your different use cases. Let's begin. Safe to say, I was pretty pumped for ProRes on the iPhone 13. It was kind of a last-minute leak that was coming out around a month before the phone launched, and we weren't sure if it was legit until, of course, the Apple event took place, and once they told us that in order to record 4K ProRes, you were going to need the 256 gig iPhone, they had my money right then and there. I spent the extra $100 for the extra storage. Even though I had 128 gigs on my 12 mini, I barely ever hit the 64 gig mark, so I really didn't need the additional storage, but I really wanted to test out these different video formats, and once the update finally came out, I was pleasantly surprised that they actually have 1080p at 60 frames a second ProRes. I'm not sure if that's restricted to just the 256 gig model, or if you can also do that on 128 gigs, but I started doing some side-by-side comparisons, and once I had the ProRes option, I thought it was really cool that it gives you a max time limit, because when you're recording at 4K, it basically eats up 6 gigabytes per minute, because this is more like lossless, uncompressed video footage off of your iPhone opposed to the HEVC format, which stands for high efficiency video codec, which is basically what Apple's been using for years that allowed them to reach new heights and new milestones when it comes to resolution and frame rates, which I've always appreciated as someone that records all my videos at 4K at 60. The iPhone has only been capable of doing 4K at 60 at this high efficiency codec, but you have to compress it a lot, and before I had my new MacBook, the files would have to be converted every time I shared these high efficiency files onto my iMac Pro, because certain Intel Macs are not very good at optimizing and reading that footage. Final Cut was far more jittery whenever I edited high efficiency video codec files. That's not the case anymore with Apple Silicon on the new MacBook Pros, but ProRes is absolutely what I've been recording all my videos on for years. It's an Apple designed format. Thankfully, they just brought support to the iPad for it, which is long overdue, but I'm glad they did it. Once I got the update, I started recording a few test videos at ProRes, and my first impressions are, wow, this looks really, really sharp. This is extremely high quality for a phone. And then I wanted to do some comparisons, so I turned off ProRes and started recording some videos. This is cinematic mode using the front-facing camera on the 13 Pro Max, and this is just typical 4K at 30, no ProRes, just straight from the video app, which is recorded at HEVC for most people. And then this is ProRes, again, using the front-facing camera at 4K at 30, so it's consuming way more data. How much different does it actually look though? So now I've switched to the rear-facing camera on the 13 Pro Max, but we're still recording ProRes at 4K at 30, so I can't record too long. But then once again, back to regular HEVC recording without ProRes turned on, still 4K at 30 though, using the rear-facing camera. And lastly, rear-facing camera now with cinematic mode turned on, so as you can see with a person, it's pretty dang good at blurring the background, but we are capped at 1080p 30 frames a second. I'd still say it looks pretty dang good though. And doing side-by-sides, I quickly realized, oh, they're not extremely different from each other, and there are definitely circumstances where you can tell the difference. I've seen all the YouTube videos online doing ProRes versus the standard camera app, and I did my best to record some videos around my house and on my property showcasing the difference between ProRes and HEVC. The truth is, when you have kind of neutralized lighting like I do, it's kind of a cloudy day, the contrast differences with ProRes, which has a much higher bitrate, much more in-depth color analysis, it's harder to notice those details when you don't have harsh lighting. At least in the experience I've discovered, when you're outside on a sunny day, that's where you notice a bit more of that contrast ratio from ProRes compared to HEVC, where you get a little bit more blown out, a bit more of that noise, and a bit more of that gray area when you have more light shining in on the cameras. But at the end of the day, I probably put too much faith into ProRes being that big of a deal, because it's not like you're getting an entirely different camera. It's still the same lenses, it's still an iPhone, the sensors are the same size and the lens can only capture so much light. It's just ProRes is kind of an idea of capturing all this extra data thanks to the power efficiency of the A15 chip and its higher write speeds, allowing you to record videos of this extreme file size. But for those of you wondering if the extra ProRes feature is worth it and you should opt for a 13 Pro just for that alone, I would say unless you plan on filming a lot of things outside, or you're the type of YouTuber that wants to do some kind of short films with your iPhone to kind of make a point about how good iPhone camera quality is, you're already kind of in that pro demographic where ProRes may make a difference to you. But if there's anyone on the fence out there that's more like me and is more likely to use a camera for YouTube recording, I've done a couple of videos shot on my iPhone, I've done a couple of videos shot on ProRes, and I've even done a handful of videos that I shot at cinematic mode. And I intentionally tried not to tell that many people, at least until the end of the video, that I wasn't filming with my typical Blackmagic. And some people, when I recorded in cinematic mode, noticed it right away, while others had a harder time figuring out that, okay, something's a little bit different with today's video. Whereas once I shot a video with ProRes on the iPhone, the reaction was overwhelmingly obvious, because with this type of recording, if you're planning on doing a lot of like standing, talking to a camera, having a blurred background adds this extra layer of depth that the iPhone camera, because of the size of the sensors and the lenses, has a very, very hard time naturally emulating. And cinematic mode is able to recreate that depth effect in an artificial way. Granted, it's not perfect. It has a hard time kind of staying focused on certain things and masking out objects correctly, but it still does pretty dang good, to the point that I believe cinematic mode could actually be a worthy alternative and easy replacement to my Blackmagic if I was in a pinch, if I was on a trip or on vacation or something. Packing my iPhone with me is inevitable. I'm gonna take my iPhone on vacation. Whereas my camera and trying to set that up and all of its accessories, that's going to be a lot more to pack in my suitcase. Whereas once I recorded a video at ProRes, the overwhelming reaction was just, this is definitely filmed on an iPhone. In fact, some people, because I did the ProRes video right after I got my MacBook Pro, many thought I was filming off of a MacBook webcam, which made me laugh hilariously, because they were like, wow, the Mac webcam must be bad or really good. Or I guess people just picked up that because everything was in focus and you could see that I was not filming on my typical camera, people instantly assumed, okay, what is this filmed on? And for the record, it was the rear-facing camera at ProRes, but what was funny was so many people said you oversaturated the colors and you turned the sharpness way too high on this video. I did not edit the video whatsoever, so it was actually quite entertaining to get people's reaction out of that video, because when you don't tell people what to expect, you kind of get a more natural, raw reaction. Whereas if you come straight forward and say, here's a video with ProRes versus here's a video without ProRes, people are more quick to notice the difference and they're more inclined to like the ProRes, because that's obviously a higher bit rate, and when you do side-by-sides, it's very easy to notice differences. But what I like doing is just kind of showing people a video that is shot a tad differently and seeing their guesswork, seeing how close they get to predicting correctly. And what I discovered was cinematic mode, despite being capped at 1080p at 30, to the average viewer on YouTube, because I know a lot of you are watching this on your phone or your iPad. Some of you may be watching on a TV, but it's not the most common way to watch. Even though cinematic mode was the lowest resolution at the lowest frame rate, that was able to fool more people into thinking I was just recording a normal video, and fewer people noticed the differences than when I recorded at ProRes. Despite the fact that my Blackmagic records at ProRes, this camera fundamentally has a much smaller footprint it's working with, and with much smaller lenses that can't capture as much light, and with the sensors having to be reduced, and you're using all of this computational trickery to have a high frame rate and to have a high pixel density, people picked up on that quicker, even though it was recorded at a high resolution. And I've also done videos over the past few months that I just recorded at the normal HEVC format at 4K at 60, and it's kind of a similar reaction. Everyone's like, yeah, this was recorded on an iPhone, I can tell. So I'm not trying to say that the iPhone camera is bad, I'm just saying that even with ProRes now as an option, it doesn't really fundamentally change the look of a lot of these images. And I'm sure on the technical level, you know, it changes a lot of things, like Final Cut being able to handle ProRes video easier because it's more optimized for that, getting more color data out of these shots so that people who do a lot of color correction can get exactly what they're looking for out of the video. But that's why I'll once again repeat, if you're just doing something for like, I'm just recording some YouTube videos, or you're like me and you use your iPhone as like your B camera, you have a dedicated camera for the talking segments, but then for cutaway shots, you grab your iPhone because that's quick and easy. Using ProRes versus HEVC, it's not going to to make this like night and day difference where someone goes, whoa, that was shot on ProRes, you can tell because it's way more crispy. The truth is, especially if you're posting content on YouTube, there's a lot of compression that goes on YouTube's end. There's more compression when you export the video, and the difference is, as I'm sure you guys can tell in these cutaway shots, is pretty dang hard to notice. Like, if I got rid of the labels or I accidentally swapped the labels on some of these shots, many of you would struggle to pick up, okay, which one was shot at ProRes? Okay, which one was shot at normal mode? And the fact that the average viewer is going to have a difficult time noticing these types of details means to me, I kind of regret getting the 256 gig variant because I'm probably not going to use that much storage. It's also kind of inefficient to record a lot of your videos at this extremely high bitrate because how many people will genuinely notice the difference, whereas how much storage are you going to take up? Not to mention the lightning port is not very fast at transferring data, nor is AirDrop. So if you record tons and tons of videos on ProRes and you're trying to edit them on another machine, it's going to take much, much longer to get that footage off of your phone compared to HEVC, which when I record videos with the normal video mode and AirDrop them to my Mac, it's like instant. It's really, really fast, and I actually appreciate that high efficiency because it saves me a lot of time. ProRes, at least when I record around 1080 at 60, it takes AirDrop about 1 second per second to share the file, so like a 10-minute video will take around 10 minutes to AirDrop. The 4K at 30 ProRes takes even longer, so you're going to be waiting a while anytime you want to use the ProRes feature on your iPhone for like regular content creation, which is why, again, I'm not trying to say there's no reason to have ProRes on the iPhone, because certainly under certain conditions and with certain lighting, you can notice better contrast, you can get a bit less noise, a bit richer of an image, but it's just so small that I have a hard time figuring out what the use case is, who is recording videos on their phone but not really posting it for regular, easy, digestible content. But no, they're recording it for like short films or cinematic tests, and they want to make a point about how good iPhone cameras are. It's a pretty small market in my view. So if you guys are on the fence about it, I would say default to you're not going to utilize or appreciate ProRes very much on an iPhone. It's still the best video camera you can get on a phone these days. I haven't seen anything else come close. This is still miles better than any 8K video I've seen from a Galaxy phone. But if you're not on the fence and you're convinced that ProRes is useful and you're convinced you have a use case for ProRes, then you don't need my opinion. You don't need me to guide you because you know what you want. And yes, it may give you a little bit of an edge, but I understand why they restricted it to the Pro models, because I'm sure there's a lot of back-end differences on the processing side of things, and they need that extra RAM and they need that extra graphics to be able to record videos at that high a bitrate. But end of the day, we can talk about recording formats and contrast ratios and resolutions and frame rates, but what does it actually look like to the end user? And after recording lots of different versions of iPhone video for my own channel, I've noticed that cinematic mode, despite it being available on the 13 and 13 mini and it being kind of the technically least impressive for everyone because it's just portrait mode, but for video it just blurs out the background. For the average person, that makes a bigger difference than ProRes does. So you can get that on the cheaper iPhones and save yourself some money. For actually all of my video recording off the phone, I'm going to continue using HEVC because it's still extremely good quality to me, and I have not found the use case where ProRes enables the video or the image to look this particular way, which you can't get without it. And that's not to say ProRes recording is necessarily bad, it's just that HEVC is actually a lot better than people realize. Once you have an Apple Silicon Mac that can handle that high efficiency video codec effectively, and it can be really, really smooth in your Final Cut timelines, then recording with the normal video mode really ain't so bad. Saves a lot of time, saves a lot of storage, and you still can get 4K at 60 on that format, which looks incredibly good. So hopefully that gives you guys an idea of what I recommend for video recording on the iPhone, but I'm just grateful Apple goes into these types of details with smartphone recording, because I personally think video is a far more interesting subject than photography and smartphones, which all starts to blur together and look the same to me personally. But feel free to let me know your thoughts on video recording on the iPhone down below. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.